Approximately 10% of students complete their studies as the proud owner of a first-class law degree. And if you heard this information, you'd probably think it takes some sort of minor miracle to achieve the top grade. And to a certain extent, you'd be correct in thinking that if you listened to the generic information that's offered by your law lecturers and your peers. They give you information that isn't actually based in any sort of substantive evidence, but just on their own subjective thoughts and opinions. So in this video, I'm going to break down the efficient study framework that I've used that's purely based on evidence and help me to achieve a first-class degree. Hi friends, welcome back to the channel. My name is Gareth and I'm a lawyer and lecturer based in Oxford in the UK. And in this video, I'm going to be breaking down my study framework that I use to consistently rank in the top few law students for each of my modules throughout my law degree. And this video is going to be broken down into 3 parts, so just skip to the part that is most relevant to you. Firstly, I'm going to be talking about the Feynman Technique, which I use to very easily condense the legal knowledge that I learned into easy to understand bite-sized chunks of information. Secondly, I'm going to be talking about how I can actually structure my learning using something known as active recall. And finally, I'm going to be talking about how to acquire that knowledge as efficiently as possible using a process of interleave practice. And I'm going to show you my very own interleave study sheet that enabled me to quickly and easily improve my weakest areas of the law. The Feynman Technique is essentially a learning model that was developed by this pretty clever chap, a physicist known as Richard Feynman. And he said that if you can break down a difficult concept or difficult topic into very simple components and can explain it coherently to a layperson, then you understand that knowledge really, really well. So the point is, if we're doing law, for example, we want to break down those legal topics, those difficult legal topics, into very simple bite-sized chunks of information that we can coherently explain to a child or to someone who has no understanding of that particular topic. And the Feynman Technique actually reminds me of this very famous quote by Albert Einstein, which went along the lines of, if you can't explain it simply, you don't know it well enough. So put another way, if you can't break a legal concept into its very basic constituent parts, then you haven't grasped the concept fully. And so it exposes your weakest points very, very quickly. If you can't explain something on camera or in front of the mirror, then you know you have to go back and look at those parts again. So let's say you wanted to learn about overriding interest in registered land. The process would be as follows. The first step is to identify the concept that we want to learn and to jot that down at the top of the page. So here we want to learn about overriding interest, so that's what we're going to put at the top of our page. The next stage of this process is to write down or teach someone everything you know about this particular topic. So for instance, with the topic of overriding interest in registered land, we know that maybe paragraphs 1 to 3 or Schedule 3 of the Land Registration Act 2002 is important. So we can just write down this and any other information we know on this piece of paper. And you can take as long as you like over this particular exercise, but just try to write down everything you know in your mind about that topic. No doubt, while trying to write down everything you know about the topic, you're going to have some gaps in your knowledge. And this is where the third step is useful. In the third step, you're going to refer to your notes, to your lectures, to your textbooks, etc., etc. And we're going to write down all the different pieces of knowledge that we missed out on in the second step. The final step is that once you've got all of these notes together, you've got your own particular notes and you've got the notes from the textbooks, etc., that are filled in your particular gaps, you want to reduce this knowledge into some very basic structured notes. So for example, you can check out my website, Digestible Notes, which I'm going to link below, which has done exactly this for all of the core legal modules. And so every time you come back to a topic, you want to follow this 4-step process of the Feynman Technique. And over time, you're going to have a really clear, succinct set of notes that you can learn from really easily. And not only that, you're going to be able to explain all of the topics, all of the laws that you need to learn for your law degree in very, very simple terms to anyone who wants to know about it. When I was at university, I enjoyed taking this process one step further using something known as progressive summarization. And essentially it allows me to take my notes on all my different legal topics and break it down into layers of different summaries. Let me show you how this works. As you can see here on Notion, a workspace I particularly enjoy to store all my learning resources, I have written some notes on land law. If we just dive into my notes on overriding interests, as that's what we're talking about, you can see how I've used different layers of notes to condense the topic. I have my first level notes, which includes all the information I initially felt was relevant. Then at a second layer, I condensed each of these sections into summaries. So I have summaries for each of the paragraphs in Schedule 3 of the Land Registration Act 2002. And finally, I have a toggle here that includes a summary of the entire topic in an extremely condensed manner that gives me a holistic snapshot of overriding interests. So now when I use the Feynman technique and I'm trying to explain different legal concepts and I have a particular gap in my knowledge, I now have a structured progressive summarization of my notes. So if I found a topic particularly difficult, I can see my notes in depth, but if I only struggled a little bit, then I can look at the more holistic notes, which is like a 1 or 2 sentence of the entire topic itself. So it allows me to break down my studies into these competency levels. Although the Feynman technique is perfect for initially condensing your understanding of all these different legal topics, you still need a process of structuring your learning, and that's where active recall comes in really handy. The active recall method works as follows. Basically, instead of taking notes from textbooks, highlighting stuff, underlining stuff, etc., what you want to be doing is transforming all of the stuff that you learn into sets of questions. So everything from criminal law should be written down as a question bank, and you should learn directly from that. And it's been confirmed in literally hundreds of studies that this is the best way for you to learn, because it forces you to retrieve information with intent rather than passively reviewing the topic. After all, learning isn't about what information you can put into your brain, but rather the information that you can take out of your brain at a moment's notice. When I was at university, the advice for when it comes to studying was to work hard and to take regular breaks. But it's this sort of generic advice that leads you to not really know how to study at all. There's no structure to the method of work hard, take breaks. But the active recall method, in contrast, forces me to focus on the areas that I need to improve most. And this completely revolutionised the way in which I learned law in my second year of university, because I was constantly improving my weakest areas. So let me hop over to my laptop to show you how this works. Having gone through my notes, I would write down questions on everything. So for each topic, you ensure you have an awesome bank of loads of questions that you can refer to every time you sit down and study. Here you can see all the questions I have on registered land, and you would go through each question trying to answer them as best you can. If you don't know the answer to one of the questions, then make sure you give it a different colour, so such as red for example, and you can either toggle this little toggle next to the question, or you can refer back to your notes to find the correct answer. The next time you go over the question again, make sure you pay particular attention to the questions in red, as this was your area of weakness last time. Doing this ensures you're automatically implementing a system of spaced repetition into your studies, which I talked about in my previous video, and also gives you a solid foundation for actually remembering the law itself. Active recall was imperative in ensuring that I wasn't just relearning content I already knew, and forced me to focus on the areas that I was weakest at, and therefore made each study session a lot more productive. However, I knew that if I wanted to communicate my legal knowledge effectively, I had to know how the different areas of the law link together, and that's where I embraced something known as interleave study. Interleaving is when you alternate your studying between 2 or more related concepts. For example, in one study there were 2 groups of students who were going to be tested on a series of paintings. In the first group, they were given each of the paintings in blocks of artists. So they were giving all the paintings from Cézanne, all of them from Monet, all of them from Van Gogh, etc., etc. And in the other group, they were given all the paintings in an interleaved manner. So all the paintings were mixed. They would have one from Monet, then Cézanne, then Van Gogh, and it would be all mixed up and jumbled up. And when it came to the test itself, it was found that those who had looked at the paintings in this interleaved mixed manner far outperformed the group that had looked at the paintings in blocks, and that's because they could more easily spot the patterns between the painters themselves, instead of thinking about them in isolation. I used this idea in my third year of university to develop something known as an interleave study sheet to help me spot the links between different modules and also within the modules themselves, because I understood that if I wanted to become a first-class law student, I couldn't think of all of these subjects in isolation to perfectly and properly critically analyse the law, you have to understand how it all relates to one another. The approach I took was to use Google Sheets, and you create a sheet for each of the modules throughout your degree. Then in the first column of each sheet, you write down all the topics you need to study, as you can see here for land law, which enables me to accurately scope the subject and visualise what I have to learn. Then every time you actively recall the subject using the aforementioned method, you simply write the date in the next column along. Over time, you will have a number of dates that signify the repetitions of reviewing that topic, helping you to keep track of when you study the topic. Crucially, by colour coding the project, for example red to indicate poor comprehension and green to indicate good comprehension, you can quickly jump from one topic or one module to the next with a particular focus on the trickiest areas for you. It's honestly such a simple system, and it creates an unbelievable workflow into your legal studies. It pains me that law students are still given this generic information to work hard and look at your textbooks, read all the articles and make loads and loads of notes, when there are much simpler, more productive methods of studying. I've literally given you my exact blueprint to achieve a first-class law degree, so I really hope you do put some of this information into practice, because it'll make your life so much easier, I promise. The crucial point to remember is that ranking first in law school is not about who can work the longest or who can take the fewest breaks, but it's about having an efficient learning process that you can rely on. For me, that was using the Feynman Technique to condense difficult legal topics into its constituent and basic parts. It was using active recall to ensure that I was structuring my knowledge by focusing on my weakest areas, and then using interleaved practice to ensure I saw the links between the various legal topics that I learned. Now, you don't have to use my exact processes because different things work for different people. But I do want you to know that you don't have to lock yourself away in the law library to achieve top grades. If you enjoyed this video, then make sure you check out my video on how I memorized everything in law school, which is going to be somewhere over here. In this video, I explained how I use spaced repetition to remember literally hundreds of different legal cases, allowing me to have an abundance of legal cases at my fingertips when it came to answering questions in the exam. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, and I shall see you in my next video. Goodbye.